What if the way we've all been taught to learn languages is just wrong? Today, we're going to dive into this really powerful idea from Mustafa Barak, which is that fluency isn't about just memorizing rules. Nope, it's about truly acquiring a language, like making it a real part of who you are. So let's unpack what that actually means.
And this quote, wow, it really nails the core of this whole philosophy. The idea is that, traditional learning kind of treats our brains like a computer's hard drive. We're just loading it up with information. But this approach, it's totally different. It's all about digestion, integration, taking that abstract knowledge and turning it into a skill you can actually use. It's like the difference between just knowing the ingredients for a cake and actually being able to bake it.
Okay, does this question feel familiar to anyone? I bet it does. You spent years in classes, right? You know the grammar rules backwards and forwards, but then the second you actually need to speak, poof, nothing. You just freeze up. So let's get into why that happens, and more importantly, how we can finally break that frustrating cycle.
And this right here, this visualizes the whole problem perfectly. On one side, you've got loading information. It's like trying to cram everything through a tiny funnel. It's fast, sure, but it's messy and most of it just spills out and gets forgotten. But then look at the other side, acquiring knowledge. That's like carefully laying each brick of a house. It's slower, yeah, and it's deliberate, but you're building something solid, something that's going to last a lifetime.
All right, so let's get into it. If we're going to build this language house that lasts, we need a strong foundation. So what are the core principles we need to build on?
Okay, principle number 1. It's simple, but it's absolutely crucial. No blessing without effort. I mean, look, deep learning can feel like pushing a giant boulder uphill. It's hard. There are going to be obstacles. But the whole philosophy here is that the effort, that is the point. There are no magic shortcuts. And just accepting that this is a tough journey, that's the very first real step toward actually mastering it.
And I just love how this is put. I mean, think about it for a second. That one vocabulary word you had to look up 5 different times, or that sentence structure you really had to wrestle with. Those are the things that stick with you. They're not just memorized facts, they're earned. They become a real part of your own unique way of speaking.
Which brings us to principle number 2. It's all about quality effort. This is so important. We're not talking about cramming for a test here. Going hard for one day might feel productive, like a really intense gym session, but that feeling fades fast. Real strength, real fluency, that comes from consistent daily practice. A little bit every single day builds a skill that lasts. A lot once in a while, well, that just leads to burnout and you forget everything anyway.
And this reframes the whole goal, doesn't it? It's not about being gifted or talented at languages. It's about perseverance. It's about showing up. Every single small, consistent effort you make, it leaves a lasting trace in your brain. And it's that daily commitment, that's what slowly but surely turns those clumsy, awkward sentences into confident conversation.
Okay, so our foundation is laid. It's strong. Now it's time to start building the walls of our language house. We're going to shift gears here from the internal mindset of learning to the external act of communicating. Because it turns out it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. It's about meaning and discipline and respect.
So to help us understand this discipline, we get this framework called TLTFBS. Now look, don't worry about memorizing that acronym. The key idea here is that communication is a whole body thing. It's not just your brain firing off a signal. The most important connection to see here is the one between thought and feeling. I mean, you can say a perfectly correct sentence, but if it's not backed by any real, sincere feeling, it just falls flat. And this visual just makes the whole flow so clear. Check out the path it takes. It starts as a thought, up in your mind, but before it actually becomes speech, it travels down through the heart. That's where it picks up feeling and intention. Only then does it become sound. It shows that real communication, true communication, has to be filtered through empathy. A word can be technically true, but without that filter, it can still cause a lot of damage. So if that's how we communicate, what's the point of it all? Well, this is where the philosophy zooms way out and gives us this amazing roadmap for personal growth called the 3 cycles. Cycle 1, that's what we've been talking about, acquiring knowledge. But it doesn't stop there. Cycle 2 is all about using that knowledge with tolerance and protecting your own well-being. And then, finally, Cycle 3 asks the biggest question of all. How do you take everything you've learned and turn it into a meaningful life? And this quote, it just ties it all together so beautifully. Knowledge gives you the power to do things. Well-being is the compass that shows you the way.
But it's meaning. Meaning is what turns the whole journey from just a dark path into a brightly lit road. It's just such a complete, holistic view of why we even bother to learn in the first place.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy, right? We have the why. Now it's time to get practical. Let's look at the how. How do we actually take all these powerful principles and put them into practice?
The way we put this all into practice is with something called the harmony system. It's a staged approach, pretty straightforward. First, you build that solid foundation we talked about. Then, you start adding structure and developing your skills. And finally, you move into dynamic, real-world communication. The whole point of the harmony system is to get you to activate what you've learned, to actually use it.
Now, a really key tool inside this system is called the EQA method. That stands for example, question, answer. And its whole purpose is to break that habit of just passively listening. See, instead of only taking information in, you're immediately challenged to give something back. It forces your brain to switch from reception mode into production mode. And that switch, that's where the real learning kicks in.
And here's how simple and crazy effective it is. So, speaker A makes a statement. Right? I love eating fried chicken with rice for lunch. Then they immediately flip it into a question. What do you love eating for lunch? The key here is that it's super low pressure. This isn't a test. It's just an invitation to connect. So, what about you? What do you love eating for lunch? No, seriously, think of an answer right now, in your head. Did you do it? See what just happened there? Your brain had to switch gears from just listening to me to actually producing language. That, right there, is the EQA method in action. You just activated your English. And when you practice these little productions over and over and over again, they start to link up. And before you know it, you're having a real conversation. It all starts with a simple, confident statement, just like what David says here. And then the other person, Robert, responds and shares something about himself. This is the goal. It's that natural back and forth rhythm. We've officially moved away from just doing a grammar exercise and stepped into a real human connection, all built through language. All right, this brings us to our final and maybe the most important section of all. The ultimate goal here is to move beyond just learning a language and to start truly living it. So this is what the final cycle of mastery looks like. We all do the first few parts, right? We listen, we read, we repeat. But for so many people, the process just stops there. The most crucial step, the one that makes everything else stick, is that last one. You have to produce. You've got to actively speak and write and create with the language. That is the only thing that makes it permanent. And this final idea is maybe the most important takeaway from this whole thing. The language you only keep in your head, that silent language, it will eventually fade away. It's the language you actually use, the language of production, that truly becomes a permanent part of who you are.
So, this whole philosophy doesn't just hand you all the answers. It leaves you with a challenge. You now have the principles, you have the tools, and you know that the language you produce is the language that stays. So the only real question left is, what are you going to create?